The rain had been falling since dawn, soft but relentless, the kind of drizzle that turned the city into a watercolor. I was halfway through a video call with my design team when the sound came. The doorbell. One short ring, then another faster. Someone was pressing it with impatience. At first, I ignored it. Seattle delivery drivers were unpredictable. Sometimes they rang the wrong unit, sometimes they forgot to leave the package. But when it didn't stop, something in me tightened. I muted the call, apologized to the team, and stood up. The hallway camera showed 3 figures standing outside my door. My breath caught before I even recognized them. My parents. And behind them, my brother, Ethan. The image didn't feel real at first. The camera lens distorted slightly, the edges warped by the rain, so it almost looked like a memory. But then Mom looked straight into the lens, smiled, and waved. Ethan stood there with his hood up, holding 2 heavy suitcases. I hadn't seen them in over 2 years. My chest felt suddenly small. I pressed my hand against it, steadying my breath, and walked toward the door. When I opened it, the hallway filled with the smell of damp wool and old perfume. My mother's voice was the same as always, cheerful in tone but cold in temperature. "Surprise, sweetheart," she said. "We thought we'd stop by." I looked at the suitcases first, then at Ethan, who shrugged like this was the most natural thing in the world. "Hi, Nalani," he said. "Nice place. You didn't tell me you were coming," I said quietly. Dad smiled faintly, the kind of smile that asked for permission without actually waiting for it. "It's been too long. We thought we'd see how our girl's doing up here in the clouds." They were already stepping inside before I had a chance to respond. My apartment was on the 38th floor, all glass and quiet space, built from 7 years of work and too many nights of overtime. Watching their reflections move across the marble floor felt like watching strangers walk into a dream I had built to escape them. Mom's eyes swept across the living room. "Oh my, you've done well for yourself." Her voice was light, but I could hear the undertone, disbelief, maybe envy. Ethan dropped his bags near the sofa and stretched. "You live alone, right? Must be nice." "Mostly," I said, closing the door. "Good for focus, bad for your social life," he added, grinning. "If I had a place like this, I'd host parties every weekend." Mom laughed a little too loudly. She's never been the party type. They all took seats before I could offer them. I felt like a guest in my own home. My laptop on the dining table was still glowing from the paused meeting. The people in the call were waiting. I typed one message, "Emergency, we'll update later." Then I shut the lid. "So," I asked, "what brings you here?" Ethan looked at Mom. Mom looked at Dad. Dad cleared his throat. "We were visiting your aunt in Tacoma," Mom said finally. "Your father thought we could stop by for a few days. It's been ages since we had family time." "A few days," I repeated. "Just until the weekend," she said, already glancing toward the hallway that led to the guest room. "You do have space for us, don't you?" I hesitated. I could hear the city outside, the faint whistle of wind against glass. Inside, the air was tight. My brain started listing the meetings I would have to move, the quiet hours I was about to lose. "Yes," I said eventually, because the old instinct was still there, to say yes to make it easy to avoid the look that always followed refusal. Mom smiled, triumphant. "Wonderful, Thomas, get the bags." Ethan lifted his eyebrows at me as if to say, "What can you do?" Then he disappeared into the hallway with the luggage. I stayed where I was, next to the door, fingers still resting on the handle. Every time they visited, something shifted in me. It was like gravity changing direction. By evening, the apartment smelled of food and rain. I made pasta because it was fast and silent. Mom insisted on setting the table. She opened the wrong drawer 3 times and commented each time, "You organize everything so neatly. I could never live like this." "That's the point," I said before I could stop myself. She glanced at me but said nothing. Dad poured himself wine. Ethan helped himself to a full glass. "To family," he said. I raised my glass out of habit, not belief. Dinner began with small talk that wasn't small. Mom asked about my job. I told her I was leading a new project, a citywide data system for smart infrastructure. She nodded, but her eyes were already on the furniture. "This place must have cost a fortune," she said. "How do you manage all those bills?" "I worked for it." "I know, but still, it's a lot of responsibility for one person." "We worry about you, living alone." I smiled thinly. They worried about the cost, not about me. Ethan leaned back, chewing loudly. "You must be doing great. I checked your LinkedIn last month. Big promotion, huh? Not bad for a little sister." "Thanks," I said. "I mean, some of us aren't built for 9 to 5, you know?" He added. "Creative people need space to breathe." Mom placed her hand on his arm. "Your brother just needs the right environment." I said nothing. The same line she had used since we were kids. Dinner ended without dessert. Mom insisted on washing the dishes even though I told her I had a dishwasher. When I walked back into the kitchen, she was standing near my desk, looking at the stack of unopened mail. "You've got letters from the bank," she said. "I'll handle them later. Shouldn't you check? Sometimes they send important things." I said I'll handle them. Her fingers lingered on one envelope longer than they should have before she placed it back. When she turned to face me, her expression was gentle, almost rehearsed. "You've changed," she said softly, more serious, more distant. "I'm just tired," I replied. She smiled, but her eyes were calculating. I had seen that look before, right before she decided something that would cost me peace for months. Later that night, after they went asleep, I sat on the balcony with a blanket around my shoulders. The rain had turned into mist. Below me, the city lights blurred into a silver haze. I opened my laptop again, not to work but to breathe. Lines of code always calmed me. They made sense, they obeyed rules. Then I heard the quiet creak of the guest room door opening. A shadow moved in the hallway. Ethan's voice came low. "Hey, you still awake?" I didn't answer. He walked closer. "You know, Mom said you might help me with this startup idea, just a small investment." "Ethan," I said, turning to him, "it's 2 a.m. I'm just saying it's family, right? We help each other." I stared at him until he looked away. He muttered something and went back to his room. When the apartment was silent again, I exhaled slowly. My heart didn't slow down right away. I felt the faint ache behind my eyes, the one that came every time the past tried to make itself comfortable again. In the reflection of the glass, my face looked half lit, half hidden. It was strange to realize that even surrounded by light, I still felt the pull of old shadows. And as I closed the balcony door, I whispered the same sentence I had whispered years ago when I left home for the first time. "This time, I won't disappear." The morning came too early. Light spilled through the curtains like water that didn't ask permission. I had gone to bed late, but sleep never really came. Every sound from the guest room had kept me half awake. The clinking of glass, the faint hum of the bathroom fan, Ethan's footsteps moving around as if he was still exploring a hotel he didn't pay for. When I walked out, Mom was already in the kitchen. She wore my apron, humming softly, flipping pancakes with the confidence of someone who owned the place. The smell of butter mixed with the faint scent of my perfume, the one I always sprayed before work. It made the air feel wrong, like someone had rewritten the morning. "You're up," she said cheerfully. "I thought I'd make breakfast. You work too much, you need proper meals." "I usually just have coffee," I said. "That's not healthy, you'll get ulcers. Sit down, your father is checking the pipes. He says he heard a leak somewhere." "There's no leak," I replied. She shrugged. "He likes to fix things, it makes him feel useful." I sat at the counter. My laptop was there, open to yesterday's work, full of code and graphs and emails waiting for me. I tried to type but couldn't focus. Ethan stumbled out of the guest room a few minutes later, wearing one of my hoodies and holding his phone. "Morning," he said, yawning. "Do you have any oat milk? Regular milk messes with me." "You're lucky there's coffee at all," I said. He grinned. "So grumpy, you used to be fun, remember?" Mom looked at me over her shoulder. "He's teasing, don't take it seriously." I didn't. I was used to being the quiet one, the one who didn't rise to bait. But the tension in the air felt like static electricity, building up with each small gesture, each innocent comment that wasn't really innocent. When Dad came out of the hallway, he was holding a wrench. "Found the problem," he said. "The faucet was fine, but the pipe under the sink was a little loose. I tightened it." I looked at him blankly. "I told you there wasn't a problem." He smiled faintly, wiping his hands on a towel. "Better safe than sorry." They sat together at the table, eating pancakes and talking about relatives I barely remembered. I checked my phone under the counter, replying to a flood of messages from my team asking for updates. Work had always been my escape, the one place where logic existed. But that morning, even logic felt unreachable. When breakfast ended, Mom started clearing plates and humming again. Then she picked up the stack of letters on the counter, the ones she had noticed the night before. "What are these?" she asked. "Mail," I said. "From the bank? Probably." She flipped through them. "North Coast Savings. Isn't that the account we set up for you back in college?" I looked up. "No, that one was closed years ago. This is mine." Her hands froze for a second before she smiled. "Right, I must be thinking of something else." But her voice had changed just slightly. Dad stood and stretched. "We might run a few errands today. Need anything?" "No," I said. "Good, maybe we'll pick up dinner later." You shouldn't work so late every night. When they finally left the apartment together, taking Ethan's car, the silence that followed was thick and uneven. I walked back to the counter. The stack of letters was gone. I checked the drawers, the trash, the counter again. Gone. My heart started beating faster. I went to the guest room and opened the wardrobe. My extra set of keys, the emergency ones I kept there, were gone too. I stood there for a long minute, staring at the empty hook. The air felt heavier than before. My apartment no longer felt like a refuge. It felt like a waiting room, like something had already been decided without me. When they returned that evening, they carried shopping bags and the smell of outside rain. Ethan threw his shoes off near the couch. Mom handed me a container of soup. "We thought we'd help with dinner. You didn't eat much this morning." I took it silently and placed it on the counter. "Where are my letters?" Mom blinked. "What letters?" "The ones that were on the counter." "Oh," she said, pretending to think. "I might have put them in a drawer. Which one? I don't remember. You shouldn't leave sensitive documents lying around." Ethan opened a can of soda. "She's right, sis. You never know who could take advantage." I stared at both of them. Something behind my ribs felt like a knot tightening. "Please don't touch my things," I said quietly. Mom sighed. "We're just trying to help." "That's not help, that's invasion." Her smile faltered. "You don't have to use such harsh words." Dad walked in from the balcony, hands in his pockets. "What's going on?" "Nothing," Mom said quickly. "Nalani's just tired." I turned to leave, but her voice followed me. "You've become so distant lately. Always defensive, always cold. We're family. Why do you act like we're strangers?" I didn't answer. I went to my room, closed the door, and leaned against it. My reflection in the mirror looked like someone else, calm on the outside, trembling underneath. For the rest of the evening, I stayed in the bedroom, pretending to work. But every few minutes, I heard them moving around, opening drawers, rearranging things. Once, Ethan knocked and said he wanted to borrow a charger. Another time, Mom asked if I had cash. I said no both times. When the apartment finally went quiet after midnight, I opened my email and wrote a short message to Clara. They showed up. I don't know what they want, but something feels wrong. I hovered over the send button for a while before hitting it. The city outside was wrapped in fog, and the water below shimmered like broken glass. Before going to bed, I checked the door twice. I locked the balcony. I even placed a chair under the handle. It was a ridiculous thing to do, but it made me breathe easier. Then, lying in the dark, I tried to remember the last time I had felt safe around my own family. I couldn't. The memories were always painted with the same colors: doubt, control, and the slow erosion of self. The rain started again, tapping against the glass. Somewhere inside me, a quiet voice whispered that this visit wasn't an accident. It was a return, planned and deliberate. And for the first time in years, I realized I might have to fight for my own home. I woke before my alarm, the kind of waking that happens when your body knows trouble arrived before your mind agrees. The chair under my bedroom door was still in place. The handle was still quiet. For a moment, I let myself believe the day might unfold like any other. Coffee, code, the clean rhythm of tasks that start and end. When I stepped into the living room, Ethan was on my sofa with his laptop balanced on one knee. The television glowed with a muted music channel. He looked comfortable, almost graceful in the way only people without rent ever manage. He lifted a hand in greeting without looking away from the screen. "Morning," he said. "You are up early," I replied. He grinned, could not sleep. "Too many ideas. I think I finally cracked the pitch deck." "You want to see it not before coffee," I said. In the kitchen, I found my mail reappeared in a tidy stack near the fruit bowl. The top envelope was new, a crisp white from North Coast Savings. The seal was unbroken, but the paper felt warm as if someone had just set it down. I slid it beneath a cookbook and made coffee without taking my eyes off the counter. Mom came out of the guest room in one of my spare sweaters. It hung on her shoulders like a borrowed apology. She touched the back of my chair and asked how I slept. I said fine. She smiled and said she sleeps like a pebble always has. I had never heard that phrase before, but I knew what she meant. Hard, small, easy to ignore. Dad came last, rubbing his eyes, already looking for a task. He asked if I had a toolbox. I said yes. He asked where the building kept the maintenance schedule. I said downstairs. He nodded like a commander receiving a map. Ethan closed his laptop. "I thought we could talk numbers," he said. "I just need a gentle push to get the project into motion. Something to cover a few months of burn." "What kind of project?" I asked. "Content Studio meets brand agency," he said quickly. "Long-form video, street interviews, live pop culture react segments. We start lean and build community first. Sponsors come once we hit traction. I have a friend who knows a friend who can open doors. How much is a gentle push?" He took a breath as if preparing for a cold pool. 7,000 to start. Maybe 8. Short-term bridge. We are family. I held the coffee mug with both hands to hide the fact that they were cold. I said I could not. He laughed as if I had told a joke he almost respected. His face relaxed into a shrug that said we will see. Mom set plates on the counter as if we had agreed to brunch. She said, "Your brother is trying. You know how hard the market is right now. Your father and I always help where we can. It would be nice if you joined us." Dad turned the television off. Silence filled the room in a thick way. He looked at me with a face I recognized from childhood, a face that asked while pretending it did not. "I have to work," I said finally. "I have a deadline today." "Then we will be quiet as mice," Mom said, and smiled the way a person smiles at a cat that has already decided to leave. I sat up at the dining table. Work usually brings clarity, like stepping into a clean room. I opened the codebase and stared at it until the lines stopped swimming. Slack began to ping. I answered questions, merged a branch, ran tests. Every few minutes I felt the urge to check the hallway, to count the shoes by the door. It was a ridiculous habit, but it made the panic shrink to the size of a bead. Around noon, Mom came by with a plate of cut fruit. She placed it beside my laptop with the gentle pride of someone doing me a favor I had not asked for. She looked at the screen, at the rows of numbers, at the chart I was building. She said, "You always like to hide in your little worlds." I did not look up. She put a hand on my shoulder and squeezed once, not affection, more like possession, and then moved on. Ethan began a call from the sofa. He spoke loudly about creators and distribution. He said the word synergy. He said the word runway. He said we have an investor circling. I closed my eyes for 3 breaths and pictured Elliott Bay, the flat silver water, the way it holds light like a promise. By late afternoon, I had shipped the feature. My team posted a string of emojis that meant good job in the language of tired people. I thanked them and closed the chat. I stood and stretched and felt the ache along my shoulders loosen like an unknotted rope. I found Dad in my office, the small room I keep for deep work. He had turned on the desk lamp and was inspecting the window latch. "Dad," I said. He did not turn around. "This latch feels loose," he murmured. "Should not take much." "Dad," I repeated a little louder. "Please do not be in here." He straightened slowly, as if the request itself hurt his back. He nodded once and brushed past me. I stood in the doorway for a long time after he left, looking at the chair, the table, the tidy rows of pens, the small frame on the shelf that holds a photo of the ocean taken on a day I thought life belonged to me. I made tea and took it to the balcony. The evening was soft and gray. Gulls floated past on the wind as if they had nowhere to be. My phone buzzed. Clara again. "Surviving," she wrote. "Barely," I replied. "Need an exit plan, tell me you have one." I stared at the message and typed, "I have a spine." She sent a heart. I went back inside and found Mom in the kitchen with my mail again. She was not reading, only touching each envelope like a fortune teller. I reached for the top letter. Her hand stayed on it a moment longer than mine. Then she let go. "Do you remember the account we made for you when you started college?" she asked softly, as if we were sharing a sweet memory. "I remember opening my own account with scholarship money," I said. She tilted her head. "We helped a little here and there." Families do that. It was always the plan that we work as a unit. What is ours is shared. I looked at her and felt the floor tilt. "You never asked me to share anything except silence," I said. Her smile did not break, but her eyes cooled by a few degrees. "You should not talk to me like a stranger." I took the letters and moved them to my bedroom. I locked the door for the second time in one day. I set the envelopes on the desk and stared at them until the room felt upright again. The top one was the new letter. I held it up to the light and traced the ridge of glue with my thumb. When I came out, Ethan and Dad were in the hallway measuring the space between the office and the guest room. Measuring, like they were planning furniture, like they intended a future here. Mom stood with them, tapping a note into her phone. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Just thinking how to make things efficient while we stay," Ethan said. "The echo on calls is terrible in there. I could set up in your office during the day. You barely use it when you are at the dining table." "No," I said. He laughed. "You cannot be serious." "I am serious," I said. The laugh faded. He lifted his hands and stepped back as if I were overreacting to a kindness. Mom moved between us and said, "Let us not fight. We are all adjusting." I went to the kitchen and turned on the faucet just to hear water. I washed a clean glass. I dried it. I put it back. I watched my own hands perform these small rituals and felt something inside me steady, then harden. That night we ate takeout at the counter. No one said much. The television mumbled in the other room. The rain began again. When I went to put away the leftovers, I saw that the space where I keep emergency cash was slightly misaligned. It could have been nothing, a shift, a trick of light. I closed the drawer gently and kept my face blank. I told them I had an early morning. I said goodnight and went to my room and locked the door again. I answered 3 messages from my team and 1 from Clara, then turned off the lamp. I lay there listening to my apartment breathe. I thought about the first time I left home, suitcase heavier than my body, the bus air cold and sharp, the promise that I would not look back. I thought about the life I had built from small, brave choices repeated over and over, like stitches holding a seam. Somewhere between thought and sleep, I heard a soft sound near the hallway. Not a knock, not footsteps. A whisper of fabric and the smallest click. I sat up and waited. The sound did not return. I counted to 60 and then to 100. My heart did not obey. It ran. When morning finally unfurled at the edges of the curtains, I got up and checked the door. The chair had shifted half an inch. The handle was still quiet. I opened the door and stepped into the living room. On the counter sat a single envelope from North Coast Savings. It was not the one I had moved. It was another. The seal was perfect. The paper was cold. A small note rested beneath it in Mom's careful handwriting. "You should be more organized. We are worried someone might take advantage." I held the envelope and felt the weight of something I could not yet name. It was not money. It was a memory I did not have. It was a story that did not fit the facts of my life. It sat there like a seed waiting for the right weather. I placed it gently in my bag and breathed in. The day outside was pale and open. Inside, the pressure had learned my name. I did not sleep again that night. When the alarm went off, it felt like a sound from another world, a polite reminder that life was supposed to follow a schedule. I brewed coffee, black and strong, and stood by the window until my reflection faded into the morning light. Ethan was still asleep. His snores drifted down the hallway, slow and heavy. Mom and Dad had gone out early, leaving a note on the counter. "Running errands, be back soon." Underneath, it was another envelope from the same bank. This one had my name spelled wrong, the last letter missing. I turned it over in my hands, tracing the crease where it had been folded before. I didn't open it. I couldn't, not yet. The apartment felt bigger when they weren't inside it, but not in a good way. It felt hollow, as if the walls were holding their breath, waiting for the next intrusion. I walked through each room, checking drawers, closing doors, aligning small objects just to prove that I still could. Control was a fragile thing, and I had learned to rebuild it piece by piece. By noon, Ethan woke up and shuffled to the kitchen in bare feet. He poured cereal into a bowl and used my good mug for milk. He said, "You don't mind, right?" I said, "You already poured it." He smiled, unbothered. "Mom said you were always generous." He ate standing up, glancing at his phone every few seconds. Between bites, he said, "I talked to a friend who might join the startup. He's got equipment, real professional gear. You'd like him, he's logical like you." I said nothing. The spoon clicked against the bowl in slow rhythm. He set the bowl down. "By the way, did you ever check those old college accounts? Mom said there's some leftover balance or something. Maybe she'll help you transfer it." That word, leftover, stuck in the air. I looked at him, but he didn't look back. He walked toward the guest room humming off-key, the sound of someone without consequence. I sat there a long time after he left. Something about that sentence didn't fit the timeline of my life. I had lived poor. I had counted coins for bus fare. There was never leftover money. There was barely air. At 3, my parents returned. The sound of their laughter in the hallway felt like a story being rehearsed before the door opened. Mom was carrying groceries, her lipstick perfectly red. Dad was behind her with a new set of tools. "Look what we brought," she said. "I thought we could cook together tonight." I didn't answer. I was still staring at the envelope on the counter. She noticed. "Oh, that's just another bank letter. They're always sending nonsense." "Why are they sending it here?" I asked. She blinked. "Because it's your address." "I mean, why now? Why 2 in 2 days?" Her lips curved. "You always overthink. That's why you're so tense." Dad placed the tools on the floor, aligning them neatly. "Maybe she's just stressed from work." Mom smiled at him. "Exactly, you see, Thomas understands." I wanted to scream, but the sound never formed. Instead, I turned back to my computer. Work was safer. Work never lied to me. Evening came. The kitchen filled with the smell of garlic and butter. Mom moved gracefully, humming the same song as before. She had always loved to act as if nothing had happened, as if denial itself were a form of grace. During dinner, Ethan announced, "I'm meeting my investor tomorrow. Might need to stay here a little longer till things settle." Mom nodded. "Of course, honey, Nalani won't mind." "I do mind," I said quietly. The air stopped moving. Forks froze. For a full 10 seconds, no one breathed. Ethan laughed first, thin and sharp. "Wow, okay. So we're counting days now?" Mom's smile faltered. "Nalani, that's not very kind. Family helps each other." "I've been helping for years," I said. "Maybe too long." Dad cleared his throat. "Let's just eat. It's been a long day." But Mom didn't let it go. She leaned forward, elbows on the table. Do you remember who paid your first semester's deposit? Your father signed those papers. We believed in you when no one else did. Don't act like you did everything alone." The words landed softly, but they cut deep. I remembered scraping together scholarships, editing papers for strangers, skipping meals. I remembered no deposit, no support, only silence. "I don't recall that," I said. "Of course you don't," she replied. "You've forgotten everything that doesn't fit your story." Something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger yet. It was realization. The kind that begins small, like the first crack in ice before the sound comes. After dinner, they moved to the living room to watch a movie. I cleaned the table in silence. My hands moved automatically. Plate, fork, glass, wipe, rinse. The ritual steadied me. When I finally looked up, the reflection of the TV shimmered on the window. They looked like a picture from another life, a family that could have been real if not for the truth underneath it. When the credits rolled, they went to bed, laughing softly about some scene. I stayed up, opened my laptop, and searched my old bank accounts. The page loaded slowly, the kind of slow that feels deliberate, like resistance. There it was, an old transaction from 12 years ago, a transfer labeled Family Education Fund. Amount, $25,000. Date, my first week of college. The sender, Willis Household Trust. I stared at the screen until my throat closed. I had never seen those words before. In the corner of the screen was a note, account closed by secondary holder, 2016. I scrolled down. The secondary holder's name appeared in faint letters, Margaret Willis. I shut the laptop and sat back. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Outside, rain hit the glass again, gentle but endless. I pressed my palms against my eyes until the shapes of light turned red. Somewhere in that darkness, a single thought formed. This was never about family. It was about ownership. And I was the only one who didn't know who truly owned me. The letter on the counter waited unopened. I didn't touch it. Not yet, I needed to breathe first. But deep inside, I knew that when I did open it, everything would change. That was the night the unease became evidence. That was the first step toward the truth hiding under my own last name. The invitation arrived as a text from Mom, short and deceptively sweet. "Dinner at Elaine's on Saturday. It's Ethan's birthday. Family only." I stared at it for a long time. My fingers hovered above the keyboard before I finally typed, "I'll come." I didn't want to. Every instinct told me to refuse, to invent a deadline, an emergency, anything. But a quiet voice whispered that maybe I needed to see what game they were playing. The envelope from the bank still sat unopened on my desk, a silent witness to everything I was starting to suspect. I needed answers. Saturday came dressed in thin gray clouds and the smell of wet pavement. I chose a navy dress, plain and modest, nothing that could be accused of showing off. My reflection in the mirror looked calm, maybe even polite, but my pulse was a steady drum beneath my skin. Elaine's house was in West Seattle, a quiet neighborhood with big trees and small gossip. The driveway was full of cars. I parked 2 houses away and walked slowly toward the laughter spilling from the backyard. Balloons in gold and black hung from the fence. A banner said Happy 35, Ethan, in uneven letters. Through the sliding glass doors, I could see my mother moving between tables, arranging plates like a conductor preparing for a performance. My father stood near the grill, talking to an uncle I barely remembered. Ethan was in the center, beer in hand, surrounded by people smiling too hard. When I stepped inside, Mom looked up, and for a moment her face flickered between pride and caution. "There you are," she said. "We weren't sure you'd make it." "I said I would," I replied. She kissed my cheek, her perfume sharp, expensive. "You look nice," she said. "I'm glad you wore something simple." I smiled thinly. "You too." Ethan saw me and raised his glass. "Look who finally decided to join us, Miss Big Tech herself." His friends laughed. I nodded, pretending it didn't matter. The table was set for 15. I recognized cousins, distant relatives, and a few of Ethan's friends from the endless stream of failed projects he used to post online. Everyone looked at him like he was the sun. I took the seat farthest from him, beside a cousin who whispered, "It's good to see you. Your mom said you're too busy for family these days." I smiled without teeth. She likes to keep everyone informed. Dinner started with jokes and noise. My father carved steak, Mom poured wine, and Ethan told stories about his new company, his vision. Every time he said vision, Mom nodded like it was scripture. I sat quietly, slicing my food into perfect squares, pretending not to feel the wall forming around me. Halfway through the meal, Ethan raised his glass again. "I just want to thank everyone for supporting me through another year of creative chaos," he said, grinning. "Especially Mom and Dad for always believing in me." They all clapped. I stayed still. And of course, he added, looking at me, my sister, who's got a place big enough for all of us if things ever go south. Laughter rippled around the table. I felt heat rise to my face. That's not funny, I said. He shrugged. I'm serious, you've got that spare room. Mom said it's barely used. It'd be nice to be close to family for a while. I looked at Mom. She didn't look away. Ethan needs a stable base, she said. He's been working so hard, it would only be temporary. My chest tightened. You can't be serious. Dad cleared his throat. It's just an idea. We're discussing possibilities. No, I said. Table went quiet. Someone coughed. The sound of the grill outside cracked like thunder in the silence. Mom's voice softened dangerously. Nalani, don't make a scene. I'm not making a scene, I said. I'm saying no. Ethan leaned back in his chair, smiling without warmth. Wow, guess success changes people. It's not success, I said. It's boundaries. My mother's face hardened. After everything this family has done for you, you can't spare a little compassion? What exactly has this family done for me? I asked. My voice was steady now, low but clear. You used my name for your finances, didn't you? The old education fund? The bank letters? Her eyes flashed. Where did you hear about that? I found the records, I said. You opened accounts under my name, took money, and closed them years later. You never told me. The table gasped as one body. Ethan muttered, oh, come on, you're really bringing this up here. Yes, I said, because you keep pretending it's about love. It's not. Troll? Mom stood up, the air around her shifted. You ungrateful child, we built you, we gave you life opportunities. No, I interrupted. You took mine and called it help. Her hand came fast, a blur of motion and perfume. The slap cracked through the backyard louder than the music. My cheek burned. For a moment, no one moved. She was breathing hard, her voice trembling with fury. You will regret speaking to me like that. I looked around the table. My father stared at his plate. My relatives looked away. Ethan smirked. No one said a word. The world went silent except for the faint rustle of leaves above us. I reached for my purse, my fingers shaking only a little. No, I said softly, I won't regret this, but all of you will. I turned and walked toward the front door. No one stopped me. The night air hit my face like a baptism. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The drive home was quiet except for the wipers cutting through drizzle. My cheek throbbed in rhythm with the rain. Streetlights blurred in the reflection of my windshield. By the time I reached the parking garage, the anger had drained into something colder, sharper, resolve. I sat there in the car, breathing in the silence, and for the first time in years I didn't feel small. I felt awake. Upstairs, my apartment was exactly as I'd left it, clean, orderly, mine. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned against it, letting the weight of the night settle. My phone buzzed with a message. Mom, I'm very disappointed in you. Another from Dad. We'll talk when you've calmed down. And one from Ethan. You embarrassed everyone. I blocked all three without reading further. Then I opened my laptop and drafted an email to Carla Jensen, the corporate attorney who once helped me with a contract dispute. The subject line read, Personal Boundary Consultation. I attached photos of the unopened envelopes, screenshots of messages, and a short note. I need to know what legal steps I can take to protect my home and myself. When I pressed send, the clock on the screen read 11:47 p.m. The rain outside had stopped. The city lights glowed clean and distant. For the first time in months, I felt something that almost resembled peace. But under that peace was a new feeling, one I hadn't known before: power. And I was finally ready to use it. The next morning began with silence, the kind that fills every corner of a room after a storm. I woke before sunrise, my cheek still sore from the slap. The mark had faded to a pale shadow, but my skin remembered the shape of her hand. I touched it once, not to check the pain, but to remind myself that it had been real. The coffee machine hissed to life. Outside, the city was wrapped in fog. Cars moved like ghosts below the window. I sat on the couch with my mug and the pale light spilling across the floor, waiting for the part of me that always apologized to appear. It didn't. My phone vibrated on the counter, a stream of messages lighting up the screen. I didn't touch it. The only name I cared to see was Carla Jensen. The notification finally came at 9:15. Got your email. Come in at 2 p.m. We'll talk options. At 1:30, I was standing outside her office building in Capitol Hill. The rain had stopped, but the air smelled like wet concrete. Inside, the lobby was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you feel both safe and exposed. Carla's office was small, clean, and full of sunlight. She looked up when I entered. You look like you've had a long night, she said gently. I nodded. It was overdue. We sat across from each other at a polished wooden desk. I placed the envelopes, screenshots, and a printed transcript of the messages in front of her. She read silently for a while, then leaned back in her chair. Nalani, she said, This isn't just emotional manipulation. This is a pattern of harassment and financial abuse. The use of your name on any financial document without consent is fraud. The word hit me like a slap louder than the one from last night. Fraud? Yes, they've built leverage over you through fear and guilt. It's common in families with control dynamics. I stared at the envelopes, those harmless-looking shapes of paper. They were evidence of something bigger, older, darker. What can I do? I asked. Carla's voice was calm, practical. We'll start with a cease contact order. It's not aggressive, it's protective. I'll also file a notice with your building's management. They're not allowed to visit without your consent. If they try, security will intervene. And if they keep pushing, then we escalate, she said simply. Restraining orders, civil action for misuse of identity, even criminal charges if necessary. But for now, we'll start small. You set the boundary, not them. I exhaled, a slow breath that seemed to release years of silence. Do it, I said. By the time I left the office, the fog had lifted. The sun had broken through, shy and soft, brushing the wet rooftops with light. I walked without music, without distraction. The world looked the same, but everything inside me had shifted a few inches toward freedom. When I got home, the air in the apartment felt cleaner somehow. I opened the windows, let the wind move through. Then I sat at the desk and began to write, not an email, not a report, but a list. Things that are mine: 1, this apartment; 2, my work; 3, my peace; 4, my name. The fourth item lingered on the page. My name, the thing they had used, twisted, borrowed. It belonged to me again. Around 6 p.m., the intercom buzzed. I walked to the screen and froze. My parents stood downstairs, raincoats dripping, eyes blank and expectant. I pressed the talk button. You can't come up. Mom's voice came sharp through the speaker. Don't be ridiculous, we're your parents. You are not allowed here anymore, I said evenly. There's a document coming your way. It's a boundary letter. Read it. Dad's voice tried to soften the air. Let's not do this, we only want to talk. No, I said, you only want to control. Mom stepped closer to the camera. You've changed, Nalani, you're becoming cruel. I'm becoming free, I said, then pressed the button again to end the call. Their faces froze on the screen for a second before the image went black. I sat back on the couch and let the silence return. The sound of the city outside was faint but alive. Somewhere far below, I could hear a bus sighing at a stop, a child laughing, a door closing. Normal sounds, sounds that belonged to a world not ruled by guilt. Later that night, I stood on the balcony, looking at the water. The wind smelled of salt and faint electricity. Lights shimmered across the bay like scattered coins. I thought about all the versions of myself that had tried to earn love through obedience. The little girl waiting for praise, the student counting change for bus fare, the woman who kept saying yes out of fear of being called selfish. They were all still inside me, but quieter now, watching from a distance. My phone buzzed again, a new message from an unknown number. You'll regret this. I smiled, blocked it, then turned off the phone. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of being alone. I realized that solitude wasn't emptiness, it was ownership. It was space that no one else could claim. Before bed, I poured myself a glass of wine, opened my notebook again, and added one more line to my list. 5. My silence belongs to me. I closed the book, finished the wine, and turned off the lights. The city outside hummed with life. I felt the faint ache on my cheek again, not as pain but as proof that the past could touch me but never hold me. The next morning would bring consequences, messages, maybe more confrontation. But it didn't matter. The first battle was over. I had drawn the line, and this time I wasn't moving it for anyone. When morning came, it carried a different kind of quiet, one that didn't demand anything from me. The air felt sharp, cool, new. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, watching sunlight move slowly across the floor like it was learning the space for the first time. For once, the silence wasn't heavy. It was honest. I opened my email. Carla had already sent the first draft of the cease contact letter. The document was simple, clinical, almost cold. It stated that any uninvited appearance or communication from my parents or Ethan would be considered harassment. It listed my rights, my address, and the legal references under Utah and Washington privacy law. She ended her note with a single sentence. Silence is not weakness. It's the beginning of control. I read that line 5 times, then I printed 3 copies. By noon, I was sitting in the small cafe across the street from my building, the one with wood tables and quiet jazz. I ordered coffee but didn't drink it. I spent the next hour going through every word of the document, not to change anything, just to make sure it felt real. It did. When I finally signed my name at the bottom, my hand didn't shake. That night, I placed 1 copy in an envelope addressed to my parents, another to Ethan, and the last one I taped to the inside of my front door. I used clear tape, pressing it flat, making sure the corners were sharp. The paper caught the light each time I walked by, a small flag of independence. The next day I received a call from Carla. "They might react," she warned. "Be prepared for denial, guilt, anger. All of it is a form of resistance." "I know," I said, "but I'm not resisting anymore, I'm defining." She laughed softly. "That's the spirit." When I hung up, I realized how long it had been since anyone had spoken to me without expectation. 2 days later, the building concierge called. "Ms. Willis, your parents were here again," he said. "We informed them about the notice. They left a package." "Do not deliver it upstairs," I said. "Please log it as unaccepted." "Yes, ma'am." I thanked him, ended the call, and let my breath leave slowly. My hands weren't trembling anymore. The old instinct to panic had been replaced by something steadier, sharper. That evening, I sat at my desk and began journaling, a habit my therapist had encouraged. Not for therapy this time, but for clarity. Entry 1, setting boundaries isn't cruel. It's proof that I exist. Entry 2, they built me to serve them, and when I stopped, they called it betrayal. Entry 3, if they knock again, I will not answer. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls and 7 messages from unknown numbers. Different tones, same voice. "You can't erase family, you're hurting us. What did we ever do but love you?" I deleted them without reading the rest. Later, as I was getting ready for work, I found an envelope slipped under my door. My stomach turned cold. There was no name, no address, just my initials in handwriting that had raised me. I didn't touch it at first. I just stared. Then I picked it up, carried it to the kitchen, and set it on the counter beside a pair of scissors. I opened it carefully, expecting venom. Inside was a single page, handwrit. "If you continue down this path, you'll end up alone. No one will want you. We forgave your arrogance, your distance, but this time you've gone too far. Return the respect your family deserves." No signature. Just the familiar loop of her cursive and the faint scent of her perfume. I folded the letter once neatly and dropped it into the trash. Then I took out the trash immediately. Standing in the hallway, holding the empty bag, I looked down the corridor toward the elevator. The air felt strangely light, like the building itself had taken a deep breath for me. It was at that moment that I understood something. Silence wasn't a void, it was space reclaimed. That night, I attended my first therapy session with Dr. Harper. Her office was in a small red brick building near Green Lake, walls lined with books and pale lamps. The chair she offered me was soft but firm, grounding. "Tell me what brings you here," she said. I hesitated, then laughed under my breath. "Where do I start?" "Where it hurts most," she said. I took a deep breath. "It's not a fresh wound," I said. "It's old, it's just never been allowed to heal." As I spoke, I watched her listen, not interrupting, not judging. It was strange, this feeling of being heard without conditions. I told her everything. The favoritism, the manipulation, the visit, the slap, the letter. When I stopped, she waited for the quiet to settle before saying, "Nalani, what you've described is a textbook case of family control through emotional debt. They trained you to believe that love must be earned and boundaries are rebellion." "I thought I was just weak," I said. She shook her head. "Weak people don't fight. They surrender. You're fighting." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then I said, "It doesn't feel like fighting. It feels like digging myself out of a grave they built for me." Dr. Harper smiled gently. "That's exactly what healing looks like." When I left her office, the city had turned gold under the streetlights. The air smelled of pine and rain. I stood on the sidewalk, breathing it in, letting it fill the space that used to belong to guilt. At home, I poured myself tea and looked at the letter taped to my door. It didn't feel like a warning anymore. It felt like a shield. The next day I woke up to a text from Carla. "The documents are officially filed. You're protected now." Protected. The word didn't sound like safety yet. It sounded like possibility. That night, I walked through each room of my apartment slowly, touching the walls, the tables, the small objects that had once been just decoration. They were mine, and now they meant something again. For the first time since they arrived, I turned off all the lights and slept with the windows open. The air moved gently through the room, whispering across the pages of my journal. I dreamt of water, endless and clean, washing everything that wasn't mine away. When I woke, I knew something had shifted for good. I hadn't just drawn a line. I had crossed into a life that finally belonged to me. 2 days after the filing, I booked a private room at a quiet restaurant near the lake. Soft lamps, brick walls, the kind of place where voices stay close to the table. I told the manager I wanted the door left ajar, and that if the conversation grew heated, a server could interrupt with a question about water. I was not there to fight. I was there to speak clearly and leave. I arrived early with 3 folders in my tote. I set them on the table and ordered water with lemon. For a few minutes, I watched the reflection of the window in the polished wood, a long, narrow ribbon of light. My hands were steady. They arrived almost on time. My father entered first and kept his eyes on the floor as if the wood might explain something. My mother came next, back straight, jaw set, a calm face that always meant she was ready to win. Ethan drifted in last with his hands in his pockets, a boy who never learned to sit in his own life. No one offered a hug. I did not stand. I gestured to the chairs and they took them. "Thank you for coming," I said. Mom looked around the room. "This is a strange place for family to meet. It is a safe place," I said. Dad folded his hands. "Let us talk like adults," he said. "We will," I said, and slid the folders forward. "One for each of you. Please read it before you speak." They opened them. I watched their eyes move. The room settled into a hush that felt like the pause before rain. Mom was the first to look up. "What is this?" she asked softly, though the softness had edges. "Are you threatening your own mother?" "I am setting boundaries," I said. "You may call it whatever helps you listen. You are not to enter my home or my workplace without my permission. You are not to use my name on any paperwork. You are not to request money from me in any form. If you ignore these, I will cut contact completely and take legal action." Ethan let out a short snort. "Wow, someone has been reading self-help books." I kept my eyes on my mother. "This is not a debate," I said. Dad cleared his throat. "We do not want to harm you, Nalani. We only want to stay connected. If you will be reasonable, there is no need to make threats." "It is not a threat," I said. "It is a contract with myself." Mom slowly closed the folder and tapped it with one finger. "We fed you," she said. "We raised you. We took the blows of this world so you would not have to. And this is what we get in return, a letter." I took a breath. "You did not take blows, you delivered them. When I succeeded, you called it luck. When I said no, you called it cruelty. You taught me that love is a loan with interest due forever. That lesson is over." Her expression did not change, but something behind her eyes did. A tightening, a little flash of heat. She reached out and touched Dad's arm as if to steady him, or maybe to steady her own story. Ethan leaned forward. "Forget the legal stuff for a minute," he said. "Be practical. I just need a room for a while. I will be gone as soon as the studio is up. You have plenty of space. You barely use it." "Why are you making this so complicated because it is mine?" I said. "That is all the reason I need." He rolled his eyes and looked at Mom, who gave him a look that said not yet. Then she turned back to me and smiled a small, calm smile that had scared me as a child. "You think you are free because you learned a few words," she said. "Boundaries, autonomy. But you are still a branch from this tree. You cannot cut your own root." I let the silence sit. Then I said, "You are not my root. You are my history. I decide what grows from here." A server tapped the door and stepped in with a pitcher. "Water for everyone," asked in a voice light as air. "Yes, please," I said, and the simple sound of liquid pouring into glass gave me time to breathe. When the door closed again, Dad spoke in a low voice. "If we do not have family, what do we have respect?" I said. "Choice, peace." He stared at his hands. For a second I thought he might say he was sorry. Instead he said, "Your mother is doing her best." I turned to him. "Your best should not break me." Mom stood. The chair legs whispered against the floor. She gathered her folder, tore the letter cleanly in half, then into quarters, the pieces falling onto the table like paper snow. She said, "We will not accept this. We are not strangers." "No," I said, "we are not strangers. That is the problem. Strangers would not expect to own me." Her jaw tightened. "You are dramatic." I slid my chair back and stood. "We are done," I said clearly. "If you show up at my home again, I call security. If you contact me, I will not respond. If you trespass the law, I will enforce it. This is the last time I will repeat these sentences." Ethan laughed softly. "You think you can erase us with a letter?" I looked at him and felt nothing. "I do not need to erase you," I said. "I only need to choose myself." I left the room without rushing. The hallway smelled like lemons and wood polish. My legs felt light, as if the floor had risen to meet them. At the front door, I paused to pay for a coffee and thank the staff for their patience. When I stepped into the pale afternoon, Seattle looked newly washed. Back home, I taped another copy of the letter inside the foyer, not for them but for me. Every time I walked past it, I read the first line aloud. "I am not banning you from my life, but I will decide where you belong in it." The sentence fit the space like a key in a quiet lock. That evening, I video called Dr. Harper. I told her what I had done. She smiled in that quiet way of hers and asked how my body felt. I closed my eyes and listened. My shoulders were lower, my jaw was loose, my breath moved without tripping. "Lighter," I said, "not happy, not sad, just lighter." "That is your nervous system learning safety," she said. "It is not a story, it is a physical fact." After the call, I cooked rice and eggs and ate standing at the counter with the window open. Night rolled over the bay. The fairies moved like slow lamps. Somewhere in the building, a piano started and then stopped, 2 careful chords and a pause. I washed the plate and left it to dry. My intercom lit once that week, and I did not answer. A card from the concierge appeared in my mailbox to confirm the building had logged the letter. A package addressed to my parents was returned to sender. I slept with the door unlocked for the first time in months and woke to the kind of quiet that holds rather than empties. On Friday, a message arrived from an unknown number. Not a threat. A sentence. I am trying to understand. It was from my father. I read it twice and put the phone face down. I did not reply that day or the next. Boundaries apply to hope as well. Sunday morning, I walked to the pier before the tourists arrived. The water was the color of brushed steel, and the gulls traced soft circles in the sky. I stood with my hands in my pockets and let the air move through me. I could feel the old ache like a shadow at the edge of the frame, but it did not step forward. When I got home, I opened the journal and wrote 3 short lines. I am allowed to keep what I build. I am allowed to refuse what hurts. I am allowed to be loved without debt. I closed the book and looked around the room. The light had shifted to a warm strip across the rug. It felt like a blessing that asked for nothing. In the afternoon, I sorted the last of the mail. The envelopes from North Coast remained unopened on the desk. I picked up the most recent one and slid a knife under the flap. Inside was a notice about the old account, a line saying the secondary holder had requested statements be mailed to my address again. The request date was recent. It carried my mother's neat signature. I placed the paper on the table. The twist was not a surprise anymore. It was simply proof that my instincts were finally telling the truth. I scanned it to Carla with a short note. For the record. Then I filed the original in a clear sleeve and slipped it into a binder labeled with my name. Not Willis, Nelani, my name like a small bright flag. When evening fell, I turned off every light and watched the city glow. I pressed my palm flat against the glass and felt the cool through my skin. The world was still loud and complicated and full of people who would try to claim what is not theirs. But my home was quiet, and my voice was mine. The line was real now. Not a hope, not a wish. A fact that lived in paper and in breath, and in the way my hands stayed steady when I locked the door. I slept with the windows open again. The wind moved the curtains, and I dreamed of walking across a narrow bridge that led from a small dark island to a larger bright one. I did not look back to see who stood on the shore. I just kept walking, and the boards under my feet held. The letter from the bank had confirmed what my gut already knew. My mother wasn't done. Control was an addiction, and she was still chasing her dose. I sent Carla the scanned copy that morning. Her reply came within minutes. I'll initiate an identity verification block. They won't be able to request anything under your name without in-person proof. Don't engage with them directly. It was simple advice, but it burned in my chest. Don't engage. That had always been the impossible part. At work, I moved through the day like a ghost. My team congratulated me on the recent project release, but I barely heard them. Every ping from my phone felt like a ripple under the surface, as if something unseen was moving toward me. By noon, a new email arrived from an address that looked professional but wasn't. Family Trust Legal at consultmail.com. The subject line read, RE, Financial Clarification. I opened it. Ms. Willis, this is a courtesy notice regarding your involvement in the Willis Household Trust, established 2010. Your parents, as primary trustees, have requested access to documentation confirming your consent in shared accounts. If this is an error, please reply to confirm withdrawal of your participation. A courtesy notice. A trap in a polite suit. They were trying to draw me back in, to make me reply, to leave a trail of consent. Carla's voice from our last call echoed in my mind. They'll provoke you until you respond. Silence is their enemy. I deleted the email and blocked the sender. That night, I lit a candle on the balcony, not out of ritual but as defiance. Below me, the water shimmered, the sound of waves against the pier faint but steady. I tried to breathe, but something inside felt restless, unfinished. When I went inside, I saw the blinking light on my landline, an old number I barely used anymore. I pressed play, her voice filled the room. Hello, sweetheart, we got your fancy letter. I just want you to know we're praying for you. This rebellion you're in, it's not who you are. You've let outsiders poison you. We'll fix it eventually. The call ended with a click that echoed louder than the words. I deleted it, but the sound stayed. The next morning, I met Dr. Harper again. Her office smelled like bergamot and ink. She looked at me the way you look at someone who's trying to hold their world together without letting a piece slip. How does it feel? She asked. Like I'm walking uphill in water, I said. They don't stop. Every time I block one way, they find another. That's what happens when you start to break a pattern, she said. They'll push harder before they let go. It's called extinction burst. The old system fights to stay alive. So I just endure. You hold the line, she said. And you remember, it's not your job to teach them the meaning of respect. It's your job to live it. After therapy, I walked home through the rain. It fell softly, almost kindly, like it wasn't trying to drench anything, just wash the air clean. I stopped by the pier and leaned on the railing. The water below looked endless. I thought about how much of my life had been spent in reaction to their moods, their needs, their noise. Every success I'd ever had been an act of escape disguised as achievement. That night, I wrote in my journal again. Entry 4, they taught me that love means debt, but love without freedom isn't love, it's ransom. Entry 5, they built a house out of guilt, and now I'm the one paying rent for a room I never asked to live in. Around midnight, the building's intercom buzzed again. My body reacted before my mind did, a quick animal jolt. I checked the screen. It wasn't them, just a delivery man holding a small box. No name, just my address. I hesitated, then went downstairs. The box was plain, taped neatly. When I asked who sent it, he shrugged. Drop-off order, no return info. I carried it upstairs carefully, heart beating fast. My apartment felt smaller with it sitting on the counter. I used scissors to open the top flap. Inside was a single item, a small, framed photo of me at 16 graduation day. My mother stood beside me, her hand on my shoulder, her smile wide and rehearsed. Behind the photo was a note. You'll always belong here. The handwriting was unmistakable. I set the frame down, staring at it for a long moment. I wasn't angry, not exactly. It was something else, a hollow sort of clarity. They weren't trying to reach me. They were trying to erase the distance, to remind me that freedom had a cost. I took the photo out of the frame and held it over the sink. My reflection in the glass looked calm. Then I tore the picture in half, then again and again, until the pieces were small enough to flush away. When the last shred disappeared, I whispered to the empty air, I don't belong there anymore. The apartment felt still after that. Clean, mine again. Later that night, I received one more message, this time from Carla. You did the right thing destroying that. It's psychological anchoring. A way to make you reopen the door. Keep documenting everything. You're building a case, but more importantly, you're reclaiming your story. Her words felt heavy in the best way. I closed my laptop, leaned back on the couch, and looked around at the space I had built. Each corner, each object felt like evidence that I existed outside of their narrative. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise and wrote one last note in my journal for the week. Entry 6, they can't haunt a house that no longer has their name on the deed. I smiled at that. Not because it was clever, but because it was true. And for the first time in years, the truth was finally starting to sound like peace. 3 days passed without a single message, call, or envelope. Silence settled over the apartment like a truce made of glass, beautiful but fragile. I told myself they were finally letting go. Deep down, I didn't believe it. On the 4th day, Carla called. I've been digging, she said. The family trust account your mother used wasn't fully closed. There's still an active digital record under your social security number. I can't access the contents without your consent, but I can request a financial summary. Do it, I said. There was a pause. You might not like what you see. I already don't, I said quietly. By evening, she sent the file. A small PDF, encrypted. My fingers hesitated before typing the password. When the document opened, the truth unspooled like a slow knife. The Willis Household Trust had received multiple deposits over the years, business grants, insurance claims, tax refunds. Each transaction marked with my name beside the note beneficiary transfer, educational support. Except none of it had ever gone to me. The total sum exceeded $150,000. My mother had used my student ID and signature from when I was 19 to open the linked account. When the funds arrived, they were rerouted to a maintenance account under her control. The digital trail was neat, deliberate, clean until the last entry, 2 months ago. A withdrawal, $5,000, memo, consulting fee N. Willis. She was still using my name. I sat there in the dark, the glow of the laptop screen turning my hands blue. My heartbeat was steady, almost too steady. I expected fury, grief, betrayal, but what I felt was colder clarity. The manipulation wasn't about money, it was about ownership. Every transaction, every fabricated account, every guilt-laced phone call, they were receipts of control. I called Carla. How do we prove intent? Intent is already clear, she said. Forgery plus misrepresentation of beneficiary data. You can file criminal charges if you want. Do you? I hesitated. I don't want revenge, I want distance. She was silent for a beat. Then we'll file for full financial separation and fraud documentation. It'll cut all legal ties. It's the cleanest form of freedom. When we hung up, I closed my laptop and walked to the balcony. The city below was glowing, alive. I felt strangely detached, like I was watching someone else's life unfold from above. Inside, I made tea, though I didn't drink it. I just needed the sound of the kettle, something simple, something real. At midnight, a new message appeared on my phone. Unknown number again. You're tearing the family apart. Stop before it's too late. No name, but I knew the rhythm of her words. Calm, clipped, self-righteous. I typed back one sentence and didn't reread it before sending. It was already broken, I just stopped pretending it was. Then I blocked the number. The next morning, I went to see Dr. Harper. I told her everything, the trust, the documents, the message. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned forward slightly. "What are you feeling?" she asked. "Relief," I said, "and a kind of emptiness, like I've been holding my breath for years and now I don't know what to do with all this air." "That emptiness isn't absence," she said. "It's space. You've made room for yourself." I smiled faintly. "Space feels strange." "It always does," she said. "Most people spend their lives trying to fill it with noise. You're learning to let it exist." That night, I didn't turn on any lights. I sat in the living room, watching the soft flicker of the city through the window. My reflection looked calm, not unscarred, but settled. I picked up my pen and opened my journal. Entry 7, they stole my name, but they can't steal who I've become. Entry 8, freedom isn't loud. It's the sound of my own breath without permission. Later, I walked through the apartment, touching small objects that had once been background noise in my life. The bookshelf, the ceramic lamp, the framed map of the Pacific coast. Each one had been chosen by me, placed by me. They were silent testaments of independence. When I reached the door, I looked at the copy of the cease contact letter still taped there. The edges were curling slightly, the ink fading. I didn't remove it. It belonged there. Not as a warning, but as a memorial, proof that a line once drawn can hold. Before bed, I opened the balcony door and let the night wind move through. The candle I had burned days earlier still sat there, melted down to a small pool of wax. I picked it up and whispered, "We're done." And for the first time since the visit, I believed it. The next morning, an email from Carla waited in my inbox. The subject line read, "Confirmation of legal separation, WILLIS Trust." It was official. Every fraudulent link, every shared account, every signature that wasn't mine, they were gone. I exhaled slowly, then laughed under my breath. Not out of joy, but from disbelief that peace could arrive through paperwork. I forwarded the email to my personal archive with a new subject, freedom. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I turned off my phone, left it on the counter, and went outside without checking the time. The air smelled like rain and cedar. The streets shimmered with light. The world felt enormous again, unowned, unpromised. As I walked, a strange thought drifted through my mind, not bitter, not vengeful. Just simple. They built walls around me to keep me safe from the world, and I tore them down to find out the world was never the danger. They were, but the danger was gone now, and so was their story about who I was. The first morning of calm did not arrive with trumpets. It slipped in quietly while I was brushing my teeth, a small realization that my jaw was not clenched. The mirror showed the same face, but the angle of the shoulders was different. Lower, looser. I made coffee and did not check my phone. I let the kettle sing and I answered it like a friend. I decided to walk to the water. The air tasted like salt and cold light. Gulls hovered above the pier and the bay spread out like sheet metal, soft at the edges. I stood with my hands in my pockets and felt something I could not name. Dr. Harper would call it safety. I called it room. I sent a message to Clara that simply said walking. She sent back a bright dot and nothing else, the kind of answer only your people know how to give. On my way home, I saw a small community yoga studio with a chalkboard outside. Morning class, gentle flow. I went in because the door was open and the floor smelled like cedar. The teacher had gray hair and kind eyes. There were 8 of us, all looking a little uncertain, which made it perfect. We moved slowly, like people learning how to live inside their bodies again. When the class ended, I felt tall in a way that had nothing to do with height. Back at the apartment, I pulled the drop cloth from the closet and turned my office into what I used to pretend it was on Saturdays, an art room that did not owe anyone progress. I set a blank canvas on the easel. The first line was crooked and heavy. The second line was lighter. By the third, the paint began to look like water moving toward shore. Around noon, Clara knocked with a paper bag and a grin that rescued the day from too much silence. She opened the balcony and passed me a sandwich and sat with her feet tucked under her. We ate without rushing. She asked nothing for 10 full minutes, a skill I had once mistaken for indifference and now recognized as care. "How is your head?" she said finally. "Quieter," I said. "Not empty, just not crowded." She nodded, chewing. "You look taller," she said, and when I laughed she added, "I mean it. Your spine looks like it belongs to you." We talked about work, about a bug no one could catch, about the intern who kept breaking things with good intentions. Then she said, "I know you are not asking, but if you ever want to disappear for a weekend, my aunt has a cabin near the peninsula. There is poor reception," which I believe is the point. I pictured trees holding up the sky and said maybe soon. She squeezed my wrist and left with a promise to send me the dates that the cabin stands empty, as if cabins also have calendars. That afternoon, I opened my inbox and found a short email from my father. No demands, no advice, just one sentence that read, "I have started seeing someone who can help me listen better. If you are willing, I would like to meet for breakfast somewhere public. No pressure, no mother." He had signed only his first name, as though he needed to stand as himself to be allowed into the conversation. I read it twice. My chest made that small, careful movement that hope makes when it walks on a floor that used to give way. I wrote back with a time and a diner near Green Lake. He replied with a simple thank you. Before bed, I sat on the rug and let the apartment speak. It said nothing, which was a kindness. I added a line to the painting, something that looked like a shore in soft weather, then washed the brushes and left them to dry like sleeping birds. The diner smelled like coffee and cinnamon. My father was already there, 2 hands around a mug as if it needed warming. He stood when I walked in, then did not try to hug me. He waited until I sat and then sat again. The silence between us felt respectful, a new country with no map. "Thank you for meeting me," he said. I nodded. "Thank you for not bringing her." He stared at the table a moment. "I will not talk about your mother," he said. "I am here to talk about what I failed to do." I did not interrupt. He told me he had started cleaning his own kitchen, that he had washed every plate and let them air dry because the therapist said sometimes changing a small habit teaches your body to believe change is possible. He said he kept hearing my voice from that night at the restaurant. "Your best should not break me." He said the words as if they were heavier than they looked. I could have answered with a lesson. Instead, I told the truth that was simple and sufficient. "If you want a place in my life, you will have to learn to hold it with 2 hands and not with a chain." He nodded, and his eyes brightened as if something inside him finally got the point. We ate pancakes and did not rush. He asked one question about work and did not turn it into advice. He told me about a book on silence he was reading. At the end, he stood and said, "I will wait for you to offer the next meeting." I said I would think about it. He said that is enough. On the walk back, I passed a florist and bought a small bundle of eucalyptus. The apartment took the scent like a new language. I put the stems in a glass bottle near the canvas, and the room felt aired. In the late afternoon, I joined the yoga class again. Helen, a woman from the morning group, waved me over with the look of someone who knows what it is like to start over. After class, she asked if I wanted coffee. We walked to a corner cafe, and she told me she had left a life that looked perfect in photos and empty in person. She said that emptiness can be a gift because you get to decide what fills it. I told her about the painting that did not need to be good. She told me about the garden she had planted in pots because the ground behind her apartment was stubborn clay. We stood on the sidewalk and watched rain find its way to the drains. She touched my elbow lightly. "If you ever need someone to stand in a room with you and say nothing, I am very good at that," she said. I believed her. That evening I cooked a real meal, not a defense snack, but food I might serve to someone I trust. Garlic, lemon, rice that steamed until it sighed. I ate at the table without my laptop, one hand around the fork and the other resting flat on the wood like a promise. After dishes, I called Dr. Harper and told her about breakfast. She asked how my body felt during it. I said like a door was open, but held by a hinge that could support the weight this time. She said that is what a boundary feels like from the inside. Before sleep, I wrote in my journal. Entry 9, I am building a quiet that does not require permission. Entry 10, I can let people in without relocating the walls. I turned off the lamp and lay there waiting for the old dread to come back. It did not. Instead, I felt the small hum of a life that was not trying to pass a test. The city outside moved in its own rhythm and did not ask me to account for it. In the morning, I woke early and painted again. The shore became a shape I recognized, not a picture of any real place, but the feeling of arriving someplace honest. I stood back with paint on my wrist and smiled in a way that did not need an audience. By mid-morning, the concierge called to say a certified letter had arrived addressed to me alone. For a moment, my stomach tightened. Then I went downstairs and signed for it and opened it by the window in the lobby. It was from Carla, confirming that all trust records now showed me as independent with no shared financial obligations. The paper had a crisp blue stamp that looked almost ceremonial. I carried it back upstairs and slipped it into the binder with the other documents. The weight of the binder felt like the spine of a new book. Clara texted a photo of the bug we had finally caught with a caption that said, "You can come back to work now. We are done breaking your code." I laughed out loud and typed, "See you Monday." In the afternoon, I took the long way to the market. I bought plums and a loaf of bread still hot enough to fog the bag. On the way home, I stopped by the water again. The bay was brighter than yesterday. A child dropped a leaf boat from the railing and watched it travel with a look of absolute faith in movement. At home, I opened the windows and let the whole day in. I put the plums in a bowl and tore off a piece of bread and ate it standing up, and for once it tasted like nothing complicated, just good bread. I leaned on the counter and thought that maybe this was what healing was, not dramatic, just a long series of ordinary moments that no longer hurt. I sent my father a very short message that said, "Thank you for breakfast." He replied with 2 words, "Thank you." No heart, no advice. Just a period where it belonged. Near sunset, I returned to the canvas. I added a thin line of white where the water meets the air. It looked like breath. I put the brush down and washed my hands and stood by the window while the sky turned the color of peaches and then to steel. The phone was on the table, face up, quiet. The door was unlocked. The letter on the foyer wall was still there. Everything that mattered felt placed, like furniture finally arranged to fit the room. I went to bed with the windows open again. The night lifted the curtains and laid them down and lifted them again. I slept and dreamed of a house with many doors, all of them mine to open and close. And when I woke, I remembered how to choose. The first real test of peace came quietly, in the form of an unexpected sound, the phone vibrating against the counter. My father's name lit up the screen. For a moment, my old reflex returned. That quick flicker of fear. But I took a deep breath, counted to 3, and answered. "Hi, Dad." "Hi, Nalani." His voice was slower than I remembered, softer too. "I wanted you to know that I met with the financial advisor Carla recommended. We're cleaning things up. I signed off my name from the trust." I closed my eyes, listening. There was no defensiveness, no manipulation, just a man trying to stand inside his own mistakes. "Thank you," I said simply. He cleared his throat. "I didn't realize what she'd done with your name. I should have. I was there, but I wasn't paying attention." "You didn't want to see it," I said. He let out a long breath. "You're right, and that's not an excuse. I just wanted to say I'm trying." "I know," I said. "Trying is a start." There was a small pause. Then he said, "You sound different." "I feel different." When the call ended, I didn't feel drained the way I used to. The silence that followed didn't echo with guilt, it hummed with something new. Space. I made tea, the kind my mother used to brew on Sundays, jasmine, floral, and clean. I thought about how scents can outlive memories and how healing sometimes means reclaiming even the small rituals they once tainted. As I sipped, I looked around my apartment, the plants by the window, the quiet hum of my computer, the unfinished painting drying against the wall. Every piece of it had survived the storm. By evening, I met Clara for dinner. The restaurant was bright, noisy, full of warmth. She talked about her new project. I told her about yoga, about painting, about the strange calm that had started to replace the old chaos. At one point, she leaned in and said, "You know what I think? You've stopped living in reaction to pain. You're finally living for something." I smiled. "Maybe for quiet." "No," she said. "For truth. Quiet is just what truth sounds like when you're not afraid of it anymore." Later, as I walked home through the drizzle, I saw my reflection in the shop windows, same eyes, same hair, but steadier posture. I was learning to occupy my own body again without apology. When I got home, I found a small box by the door. My stomach tightened until I saw the return address, Carla Jensen. Inside was a thin binder labeled Willis Case Closed. On top was a note written in her neat cursive. "You're officially free. Keep this as proof, but more importantly, as closure." I ran my fingers along the label, then set it on the shelf beside my painting. Proof and closure. 2 words that once felt like opposites, now sitting side by side. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of anxiety, because of stillness. My mind, unoccupied, wandered to the question that had haunted me for years. What does life look like without fear? So I got out of bed, made tea again, and wrote in my journal. Entry 11. Healing doesn't mean they apologize. It means their voice stops living inside mine. Entry 12. Forgiveness isn't surrender. It's reclaiming the space they once rented rent-free. In the quiet, I felt something unclench, not forgiveness yet, but the permission to stop rehearsing old pain. The next morning, I woke to sunlight pouring through the windows. I made breakfast, watered the plants, and sat at my desk. Work emails waited, but I didn't rush. I answered the first one with a calm I didn't have months ago. By noon, a message from my father arrived. Just one line, "Thank you for letting me start over." I stared at it for a long time before replying. Start over, but don't look back, that's the only rule. I closed the laptop and went to the balcony. The city below was alive, people walking, vendors calling, traffic humming. The world had not changed. I had. Later, I called Dr. Harper and told her about the call, the closure, the binder. She smiled when I told her about the painting. "It sounds like you're rebuilding your life around yourself now," she said. "I'm not rebuilding," I said. "I'm finally building." Before bed, I wrote one last thing. Entry 13, I thought peace would feel like silence. It doesn't. It feels like music you don't need to turn down. The night was warm. I left the windows open again. Somewhere outside, wind brushed past the glass, and I thought of how long I had lived waiting for the next knock on the door. Now the only sound left was my own breath, steady, deliberate, alive. I chose the place by the water again, a small cafe with wide windows and chairs that scraped softly against old wood. Morning light moved across the floor in patient squares. I arrived early and watched the fairies drift past like thoughts that knew where they were going. My hands rested on the table without instruction. I did not practice any speeches. I had already rehearsed survival. This meeting was for truth. My father came right on time carrying a folder that did not look heavy until he sat down. He did not reach for a hug. He ordered tea. When the server left, he placed the folder on the table with both palms flat as if steadying a bridge. "Thank you for meeting me," he said. I nodded. "Thank you for asking the right way." He looked older in the morning light, not in the fearful sense, but in the human sense. I could see the line between his brows that came from years of agreeing to avoid storms. He took a breath. "I have something to tell you," he said. "It is not an excuse. It is a map of what happened." I waited. "Your mother set up the trust during a hard year," he said. "We had debt. I had made a series of bad decisions and could not face them. She called it a structure to keep us safe. She said using your name would make the grants and refunds faster because of student eligibility rules." I signed where she pointed. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself we would fix it before you noticed. I told myself many things that sounded like care and were actually fear. I watched his hands. They did not shake. He kept going. "The first time I realized money was being moved in your name without your benefit, I said nothing. Silence can feel like kindness when you are tired. I thought I was keeping peace. I was not. I was keeping power where it already lived." He opened the folder. Inside were copies, grant letters, bank confirmations. My signature curved from a year when I wrote it with hope and not as a shield. His voice stayed level. 2 months ago, he said, your mother tried to re-enable statement forwarding. She told me it was routine. I asked to see the forms. She refused. I went to the bank and asked questions I should have asked years ago. That is when I understood the whole shape of it. He slid a single page across the table. It was a notarized statement, clean and final. It confirmed my sole ownership of all accounts and the termination of any authority under my name. It also contained a short admission in his handwriting that he had signed documents he did not read. The sentence did not try to soften the act. It was plain. "I am sorry," he said. Not the kind of sorry that asks for a response, just the kind that leaves your mouth because it belongs outside of you. I sat with the paper. Somewhere outside, a gull called once and then again. The sound moved through me like a thread. I scanned the statement and the old letters. My name walked across the page like someone who had learned to carry herself. I asked him a question I had not planned to ask. "When did you realize you loved me more than your comfort?" He did not look away. "The night she slapped you," he said. I heard the room go quiet, and I recognized that quiet. It was the same quiet I had carried inside our house for years. I decided I would not hold it for her anymore. The answer landed without resistance. It was not perfect. It was real. That was enough. I closed the folder and returned it. "I do not need the copies," I said. "I need proof only when I think I am not allowed to trust myself. I am learning that I am allowed." He nodded. "May I tell you one more thing?" "Yes." "Your mother will not apologize," he said. "She cannot. Her story would fall apart if she did. But I can choose a different ending for my part in it." "What ending is that?" I asked. He smiled in a tired way that did not ask for comfort. "One where I do not confuse quiet with love. One where I do not ask you to carry my fear." The server set down his tea and my coffee. Steam rose between us like a curtain we could see through. He wrapped his hands around the cup. "What do you need from me now?" he asked. I thought about the question as something solid, not a trick. I said, "I need you to keep doing your work whether or not I answer your messages. I need you to understand that my no is not a threat. It is a sentence that keeps me upright, and I need you to meet me in public for a while longer. Not because I do not trust you, but because I am practicing safety the way people practice scales." He nodded. "I can do that." We ate toast and eggs and talked about ordinary things. I told him about the painting that kept turning into a shoreline. He told me about a walking group that meets at the lake at sunrise. We let silence sit between topics without forcing it to perform. When we stood to leave, he said, "Thank you for seeing me, not as a father, as a man who is trying." I said, "I see you. I do not promise anything else." He said, "That is already more than I gave you for years." Outside, the air smelled bright, the way it smells after rain finds the last dust and lifts it. We walked to the corner together and then in different directions without ceremony. It felt right. Back home, I opened the windows. The apartment accepted the day. I stood in the doorway of my office and looked at the canvas. The water had shape now. It needed light. I mixed white with a little gold and brushed a thin line along the horizon. It changed the whole thing without taking over. A line that meant morning. Clara texted to check in. I answered with a photo of the canvas. She sent back a string of bright squares and then wrote, "It looks like breath." The words made me laugh and then made me quiet. I wrote back to breath. She replied, "Stay there." In the afternoon, I met Helen for the gentle class. The teacher asked us to place one hand on the belly and one on the heart and notice which hand rose first. Mine rose together. The teacher said, "That is integration. Do not rush it." I did not. After class, Helen suggested tea. We sat on the low wall outside the studio and watched people hurry past with important faces. She told me a story about a friend who had to learn that forgiveness is sometimes a door you lock from the inside to protect what is healing. I said I was not there yet. She said, "You do not have to be. You only have to be where your body is." On the way home, I stopped at the market and bought lemons and thyme. I cooked a soup that tasted like a house with the lights on. While it simmered, I opened the binder Carla had sent and slipped a small sticky note inside the front cover. It said proof and closure. I closed the binder and returned it to the shelf. Evening stretched across the windows. The bay held the last light like a bowl. I took my bowl of soup to the balcony and ate slowly. Below me, a couple walked a dog with a red scarf that made it look like a small, cheerful pirate. The dog paused to look up as if it sensed someone choosing a life above its head. My phone buzzed once. A message from an unknown number. For a second, old reflex lifted its head. Then I opened it. It was not my mother. It was Ethan. The text read, "I heard about the legal stuff. I guess congratulations. By the way, I got a temporary gig editing for a small channel. I know you do not care, but I thought I should say I am trying." There was no request, no angle, just a sentence that sounded like a door creaking on hinges that had not moved in years. I set the phone down and looked at the city. I did not reply. Not because I wished him harm, but because growth is a room you cannot enter for someone else. When the sky turned from peach to slate, I went back to the canvas and drew a thin path of light from the horizon line toward the viewer. A narrow lane across the water, a place for the eye to walk. I stepped back. The painting looked like a promise. Later, I wrote in my journal. Entry 14, "The truth did not break me. The pretending did." Entry 15, "I am not the sum of what I endured. I am the shape of what I choose next." I closed the book and stood at the window. The glass held my reflection and the city at the same time. For years I had chosen one or the other. Tonight I let both exist. My face, the lights, the water, the line between them bright as a seam stitched by light. I did not know yet how the story would end with my mother. I did not know if apology would ever be a language she could pronounce. I did know that the ending did not depend on her mouth. It depended on my door. I turned off the lamps and let the room glow with what came from outside. I lay down with the windows open and the night moving like a kind tide. Sleep came without bargaining. In the soft drift before dreams, I saw the shoreline from my painting. A figure walked along it, steady and unhurried. She did not look back to measure the distance. She looked forward and the path widened to meet her. I knew her name. It was mine. 2 weeks passed. No letters, no calls, not even the quiet shadow of a new email from the old family address. Silence, once terrifying, now moved around me like air. It didn't threaten. It carried. The canvas in my office was almost finished. The shoreline stretched wide, the light on the water brighter than I had planned. I kept adding and softening as though the paint itself was teaching me how to live inside change. One morning, while folding laundry, a message arrived from my father. She wants to see you, only once. No questions, no requests. She said she just wants to look at you. I stared at the words. They didn't hurt, not like before. They just weighed something I didn't want to pick up. I typed back, I'll think about it. That evening, I walked to the pier. The city was glowing gold across the water, the wind soft. I sat on the same bench where I had once cried so hard my body shook. Now the same wood felt solid beneath me. I watched the ferry cross, slow and sure, carrying people who didn't know me but somehow mirrored me, each moving toward their own version of freedom. Dr. Harper's voice from our last session echoed in my mind. Healing doesn't erase what happened. It rewires the way you hold it. The next day, I agreed to meet my mother. A public garden noon. She arrived in her usual beige coat, perfect hair, perfect stillness. But when she saw me, she hesitated, the smallest crack in her choreography. "Nelani," she said, "you look well." "I am," I said. "And you?" She sat across from me on the wooden bench, hands folded too neatly. The silence stretched between us, but it wasn't the silence of power anymore. It was the silence of two people realizing they no longer shared the same gravity. "I didn't come to fight," she said. "I know." She looked at me like she was trying to find a version of me she could still command. When she didn't, her eyes softened or maybe just grew tired. "Your father told me about the documents," she said. "I'm not angry about them anymore," I replied. "I'm careful." "That's good," she said, though the words sounded strange in her mouth. "You always were strong, even as a child." "That's not strength," I said quietly. "That was fear." For the first time, she flinched. Not much, but enough. "You think I wanted this distance," she said, voice trembling between accusation and grief. "You think I didn't love you?" "I think you loved control more," I said. "You loved the version of me that didn't threaten your idea of order." Tears gathered in her eyes, not dramatic, just slow and real. "I didn't know how else to protect you." "Protection doesn't mean possession," I said. We sat there as wind moved through the garden. Children's laughter carried from somewhere behind the hedges. A bee circled the lavender and moved on. She said, "So this is goodbye?" I looked at her and realized I didn't need to hate her or forgive her or fix her. All I needed was truth. "No," I said softly. "This is distance. Goodbyes are final." Distance still has air in it. She nodded once, as if accepting an outcome she didn't have the tools to understand. "You look like your grandmother when you say that," she murmured. "She left her family too." "I know," I said. "You told me she was selfish." Her mouth twitched, a sad, tired, almost smile. "Maybe she was." We stood at the same time. She reached out as if to touch my face, then stopped halfway. I didn't move closer, but I didn't step back. She let her hand fall. "I hope you find peace," she said. "I already have," I said. When she walked away, I didn't watch her go. I looked at the light filtering through the trees instead, that soft, dappled shimmer that reminded me of the line of paint across my canvas. That night, I finished the painting. I didn't try to fix the uneven spots. I left the imperfections, small waves in the water, a brushstroke too thick near the edge. The flaws made it breathe. I signed it in small letters, N. Willis. Then I sat down and opened my journal for the last time. Entry 16, forgiveness is not returning. It's refusing to carry the story past its ending. Entry 17, peace is not the absence of noise. It's learning which voices are worth keeping. I closed the journal, turned off the lights, and stepped onto the balcony. The city glimmered like it was exhaling light. Below me, the bay moved in slow rhythm. I traced the skyline with my eyes and whispered, "It's mine now." My name, my story, my silence. For the first time, I felt not like I was rebuilding from ruin, but building toward something. A future without permission, a life without borrowed language. Inside, the painting dried on the easel, a horizon split by a narrow path of gold, a line of light, a way forward. And when I lay down to sleep, I didn't dream of survival anymore. I dreamed of arrival.